All right, good morning. Let's talk about an experiment I did. I like to tinker a lot. I've always had a hard time just going into work, doing my bare minimum job. Even though that's what I've been hired to do, I find it is soul-sucking to just go into work every day, do exactly what the job says without even thinking about what you're doing, or trying to find ways that you can make it more efficient, just ways that you can make the job done better, right? It's a curse. If you have that kind of brain where you like to tinker, it's really tough just to essentially be a warehouse on wheels. Just hold the steering wheel, shut up, don't think. Just shut up and hold your steering wheel. It's a blessing and a curse, right? I'm sure other guys that think the way I do, maybe they advance, I don't know. But for myself, I find it's more of a curse than anything, but it is what it is. I can't help what I am. So as a result of having that kind of a, I don't know, versatile mind, I guess I like to think, I like to tinker and do experiments. So years ago, I did an experiment. I wanted to see, okay, so the company I was working at, let's set this up for you here, they had a revolving door of drivers coming in, right? Especially at the bottom of the list, they were always quitting, so they always had new drivers coming in. So there was that's one thing. And then the second thing was, they came up to us once, they gave us all a bunch of recruiting cards. That they wanted us to hand these cards out to, just in case someone asked, right? Here's some cards. If someone asks, they're looking for a job, give them these cards and then they can call our recruiting office. And if they do call our recruiting office, and if they write your name down as a reference on the back of that card, then you will get a recruiting bonus or a referral bonus, which this sounds cool, you know. So if you happen to be going along, right, and like I said, you got this revolving door of drivers going in and out of the company, you happen to find someone that needs a job, well, you give them that card, they get a job. You get money, you get paid. So I thought, okay, well, that's really cool. This is essentially a sales thing, right? You know, because that's really what recruiting is, right? Recruiting it's sales. I know there's more to it. I've got friends that are recruiters and they will tell you, shut up, you don't even know what you're talking about. But it is recruiting, right? Part of it, or excuse me, recruiting is sales in one sense. You're selling a job. If your company needs drivers, then, and you can't get the drivers, maybe for whatever reason, maybe you're not paying enough, you have to sell people on why they should leave everything that they've got to come to you guys, right? So in my mind, in my analytical mind, I thought, okay, well, if you could get a referral bonus for just giving out a card whenever the situation happens to come your way, and if it really is a revolving door, then what would happen if you put your foot down and you start actively going out, handing these cards out, asking people to write your name down on them, like just building relationships with people, like, you know, really get going on this. Because the way I looked at it, you could potentially make you could make a couple of thousand, maybe $4,000 or $5,000 extra a year just selling people jobs, right? And I thought, okay, well, that would be pretty cool to do that. So, pardon my sniffling, I sent Human Resources a request. I said, hey, I told her what I was thinking. Can I get a bunch of those cards? Can you give me like a mitt full of those cards? So she's like, yeah, sure. And I said, hey, can I also start a Facebook page? Can I have permission to go on social media and start, you know, essentially recruiting? I told her what I was going to do. She's like, yeah, absolutely, go right ahead. Okay. So I started up a Facebook page. I started up an Instagram page. I started chatting with people. I started, you know, I started forming relationships with people. And I'm going around my social event, anywhere I knew there were people that were truck drivers, I'd be handing cards out. I'd be talking to people, right? Handing cards out, right? Pounding the pavement. Basically, I'm being a salesman slash evangelist for the company for my own interest, right? Because I wanted to see where it would go. It didn't really go anywhere. That's the short version of this story. As I got doing this, I realized something I've realized about how people operate is if I go to a company and I got a buddy who works at that company, I'm not going to care who gave me the referral. I'm going to care about my friend who works at the company, and I'm going to put their name down on the referral slip, not the guy that actually convinced me to come there, not the guy that sold me the job. That's how people do it. I did it. That's how other people do it. They put their friends' names down. So you automatically see that's the problem. By going around handing out cards, I couldn't be assured that I'm not just putting money into somebody else's pocket, essentially doing work for them, right? Doing work for everybody who has a friend in the company or has a friend who wants to come to the company. So I called up HR and I said, hey, look, we got to do something about this referral system, because there's no guarantee that if I put all my work into this, that someone's going to put my name down, right? And this was just one of the problems. I've got other problems with this. And she said, well, that's not my problem. I mean, what do you want us to do? I said, I don't know. Let's put our heads together and try to figure out a way to, make sure that the person who does the actual recruiting gets the bonus. And she said, no, we're not changing the world for you. We're not doing that. Okay, could you just maybe ask a couple of more questions before, when someone calls, could you just ask a couple of more questions to them and find out how they heard about the company? Maybe just ask them a couple of more questions and ask, how did you learn about this company, right? She's like, no, we're not doing that. Okay, so you won't do anything to try and make this work better? No. Okay, gotcha. So that was the end of my recruiting experiment. That was one problem. The other problem was you didn't get the full bonus unless the person, even if they did put your name down, you didn't get the full bonus unless the person stayed for X amount of time. I think it's probationary period, you got the full bonus or whatever. And that's how it was then, and I think that's pretty standard, and that's how it is where I'm at now, right? It's a little different now. I don't think if you work in a huge company that has a revolving door of people coming in, if the company could figure out a way, maybe in conjunction with the driver that has a little bit of drive, if they could come up with a way to make it more likely that the driver would be rewarded for their efforts, that would be worth it. That would really, in my opinion, that would be something, because then you could make some extra money on the side just doing side hustle work, right, for the company. So that would be really cool. But if you work for a smaller company, I don't even think that's in your interest. Even if they did have a system where they would reward you, and they do have a system where they reward you, but it's not a good system. Even if they will reward you, I don't think it's a good idea to go recruiting for a company. I have flat out been told, and I'm gonna go a long way around the barn here. There will be cash value here, okay? You'll get this. I'll give this cash value here. I've been told that even if you brought the company business, even if you brought them money, not drivers, but money, you wouldn't be rewarded with a pay raise. You wouldn't be getting anything for it. But if you bring a driver who is going to make you worth less as a driver, right? Because supply and demand, right? If you bring them a driver who can replace you, then they'll maybe pay you a bonus, right? So we have a philosophical problem here. If you bring the company money, they won't give you a cut. They won't compensate you in any way, shape, or form. So if you sell the company, if you sell their business to a customer, they're not going to compensate you in any way. They're going to say, thank you very much, have a nice day. But if you bring them another driver who could replace you if you quit, then they might give you a bonus. Both of those things are sales, right? One hand, you're selling the company. On the other, you're selling a job. They'll pay you to sell a job to make yourself worth less. So that's another problem I got with it. So number one, you recap a bit. There's no way of knowing if the person you referred is going to actually put your name down over their friend. And number two, the company won't pay you to bring them business, but they'll pay you to bring someone who could replace you. Maybe. So I got a problem with that. And then there's another issue with this whole thing. I don't like the idea of just being maybe paid for bringing somebody to the company. Because if I sell someone on a job and I get them through the door because the company I happen to work for at the time really needs an employee, it shouldn't matter if they stay for 3 months or 6 months. The moment they're hired and I brought them in the door, I should be getting paid. I mean, if I was a recruiting company, I would be getting paid. So it's an issue with, I don't like the idea that I bring someone to a company and essentially I'm doing the work of a recruiting agency and I'm not getting compensated for it like a recruiting agency. If I was being compensated for it properly, I would be getting a cut of that employee's paycheck for at least some specified amount of time, because that's what recruiting agencies get. So I have an issue just with the whole process. Generally, there's an issue with the process. You have to trust that the driver will put your name down. Number two, it cheapens you if you bring them in. They won't pay you to sell. They won't pay you to sell their business, but they'll pay you to bring an employee in to make you cheaper. And then third, you're doing the work of a recruiting agency, but you're not being paid like a recruiting agency. Those are my three main problems with the whole referral system. Now, I have brought people. It's like I said, it's a curse. I'm just telling you what my problems are. If you can avoid it, you shouldn't do it. It's a curse to go over and above. It just is, because I don't know how any other way to be engaged or to be happy in my situation other than being engaged in whatever I do. But I don't agree with that. Doesn't mean I agree with it. I just find it odd that a company, any company, and it's not just one, they're all pretty similar. They won't pay you to bring them customers, but they'll pay you to slice your own throat. Essentially, that just blows my mind. So that's the video today. The cash value, if you're gonna go over and above this way, do it for yourself. Be careful when you recruit people, because they won't put your name down. You're doing the work of a recruiting agency and you're not getting compensated for it. And you're making yourself worth less. So that would be my message to you. If you're a new driver watching this, just something to think about. Most drivers are not at all business oriented. You know, we'll give up, we'll overthrow our entire lifestyle because we see an ad offering a $500 bonus or a $1,000 sign-on bonus. Yay, whoop-de-doo. You know, Maybe your company will reward you by giving you a tiny little one-time bonus for bringing them customers. Or they'll give you a tiny little one-time bonus if your new recruit stays longer. But that pales in comparison to what a recruiting agency is getting, and it pales in comparison to what an actual salesperson is getting. But most drivers don't really look into these things very much. So I believe it's not, I don't know if it's intentional, maybe it is, but being leveraged to do more than your job with a pittance of a, you know, here's some crumbs for you, driver, here's some crumbs, you know. All you're doing, if you bring business, you're setting the higher ups, you're setting them up to get a fatter bonus, but you're going to get, maybe you get $100 for it. You know, I know some companies will they'll reward you like a one-time bonus if you bring a customer, but the people that win are the people at the top, not you, all right? They get the huge bonuses for making the company profitable. You get your wage plus a tiny little, some crumbs, some little scraps off the ground, right? A recruiting agency, if I've worked for companies with recruiting agencies, they're getting a portion of that driver's paycheck every week. But you get these little crumbs. The encouragement is to be a little bit more business minded. At least know what your deal is. At least know you're not really being compensated that great for these things. And you know, just think about these things. Anyway, those are my thoughts for this Saturday. I hope you've got some value out of that. If you're a new driver, hope you really think about these things. Anyway, no, maybe I shouldn't. I should save this for after. I should probably say, I got something to mention, but I'll save it for after. I'm not going to mention it right now. But if you're new here, if you're watching this, you got any value out of it, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Comment your thoughts. Maybe you have a recruiting, like as a driver, you've got a recruiting experience. Maybe you went down the same rabbit hole. You got a tendency of going down rabbit holes like I do. If you do, please comment, subscribe, and join the conversation. Stay notified. Anyway, keep your rubber side down.